Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel this morning, this afternoon, or very early in the morning for Paris. I believe it's 5 a.m. So I will first introduce Paris and thank her for getting up at this time. So the panel we'll be doing today is in conversation with the CEOs of the region and people of interest in the region. So the good news is for everyone watching, you won't hear much from me, but you will be hearing from our experts on the panel. So let me just briefly introduce everyone. We have, as I say already, Paris at 5 a.m., stateside, the CEO of Pinnacle, and we may have a guest appearance by some of her dogs, so please look forward to that. We also have Marinos, who is the CEO and co-founder of Campion. We have Vladislav, who is the co-founder of Soft Gaming, and also Marcin, who is the chief commercial officer of LVBet. Guys, as I say, this panel is to hear your perspectives on the region, and the challenges and the opportunities that you have as operators and suppliers, or maybe people interested in the region. So maybe if I could start with Marinos, with his experience and viewpoint on the CIS region, which is obviously a vast geographical region with many local specifications.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Marinos, live and clear.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, first of all, for inviting me here to speak. CIS is, as you said, a vast geographical region, a lot of different countries, a lot of different cultures at the end of the day, as it is right now. Huge population, definitely interesting for any operator in terms of entering these countries. Different languages at this point. It used to be, at the beginning, everybody was speaking Russian, but as the history evolved, let's say, we have different languages as well, unique payment methods, different, let's say, characteristics of the players per country. They like different providers, different games, different kind of games. So it's not easy to approach the region as one, but you have to go into each country specifically, understand what the actual player needs, and try to offer them a more custom-made product in order to attract them. And of course, there is legislation, different legislative prospects and everything, which is much more complicated to go into this right now. But in brief, this is what I believe about the CIS.
Okay, thank you, Manos. I think we'll come back and maybe pick up on some of those points around localization for players, and legislation earns lawyers a lot of money, as we all know. But I think, there's been some recent changes in the region, which I may push for your opinion on as well. Maybe if I go to Marcin now, thank you for joining the panel at short notice. What's your general perspective of the region in regards to what Marinos has said and also what you feel in your experience?
It seems. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. So basically, when this was presented the way it was presented, I was thinking it looks like we have a new LATAM with different countries and different approaches. Basically, for us operators, this is kind of a new territory, because I wouldn't say Europe is done, but we see like how it's going for the Western countries with the legislation. It's like advertisement ban in Spain. The new legislation upcoming coming in 2021 in Germany. This all becomes very, very challenging for most operators. So naturally, we are looking into new markets, which is, with no offense, I don't want to really sound like arrogant, but which is kind of behind in a way of legislation. So it's not like regulated that harsh for us operator at this stage. So basically, I'm Polish myself, so I see the progress in the CIS market. It is going exactly the same way it was done in Poland back in 20 years ago. And I'm talking about one country specifically, which is Ukraine. So for us, it might be, as an operator, kind of a good new start on the market, that we know the specific, to be honest, and the fact that, for example, 3 million Ukrainians live in Poland makes this market easier to approach for us, potentially also from the human resources perspective. Obviously, there's more markets in the region, but I would say, because we are most likely going to discuss this topic specifically due to the legislation coming in Ukraine as well, this is the most interesting one for us for future potentially.
Okay, the Ukraine. Okay. Maybe Paris, as I come to you as someone who is on the other side of the world as we speak, but obviously a multinational brand. And what's your view on the CIS? I mean, you're obviously vastly experienced in a lot of places. How do you see the CIS? Is it localization? Is it legislation? Is it understanding the player?
It's all three of those. Thank you. You triggered me so I don't have. No. But I think the regulations are very interesting. We, as an operator, we like the idea of regulations, but we also would prefer if regulators were more regulators and not dictators. So, if they can find that balance of taking the opportunity to understand the industry and then regulating from that standpoint, I think it's going to be quite successful. The interesting part is how you, from our experience thus far, you really need to have some form of a partner in that market. And when you're global, that's obviously not your key area. So that's what we've been doing recently, is looking for different potential partnerships in order to not drop the ball on the localization and the marketing and all those different things. But as a market in itself, pre-regulation, it has always been, Pinnacle's been quite popular, but there's also a lot of established brands that have really gotten a stronghold in the market. So it's going to be very interesting. I think in the end, as in every other market, product will be king. So it's just going to take some time for the market to mature a little bit.
Okay. I think we'll come on to some of those points about product being king and also, about marketing and brand awareness in a bit. But maybe, Vladislav, I know we can't see you because of the issues with the camera, but we can certainly hear you. So, obviously you bring a slightly different perspective as a supplier. What's your view? Marinos has talked about different games and different content for different countries. How are soft gamings viewing it, and how's your vision of the region as a supplier?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you very much for having me. And maybe we are a bit unique on this forum that we have actually started with the CIS about 12, 13 years ago. And we have seen the progress of the CIS markets, and we have seen the move to online. We have seen quite recently, actually, the new markets coming up with the legislation. And there is a lot of changes in the CIS region, and I think it's only a beginning of those changes. So I do not feel that the markets the CIS markets are unique, and we have kind of a proof that they are not as unique as maybe somebody can think if they are not involved in those markets. Is that many of the operators who started in the CIS they have successfully moved to other regions and have become quite big players there as well. So we feel that the main issue that is coming for the operators is the legislation, and everybody is actually happy that like some big CIS countries started going into that area. Of course, everybody is thinking what Russia will do and what will happen with the with legislation in other big countries, but the experience with Belarus, who have successfully already launched the legislation, and we have several operators working in Belarus for this, looks like that's the way to go.
So, you make an interesting point there, Vladislav. So and this is one I'll address to the whole panel as well before we get on to legislation. I'm not trying to put it off. You talk about, operators from the CIS that are intrinsically part of the CIS moving out of the region. Do you think we're going to see an influx, due to the lucrative nature and the fact it is a new market? to many operators. Do you think we're going to see an influx of operators from outside the region try and target this market? And how do you think they will compare with the guys, that do have the local knowledge that maybe are operating already, Vladislav?
So again, we are not an operator, so probably we are not as involved in.
I think you can give a good opinion as a supplier as I can, because operators always have their own story to tell. I'm trying to understand from the supplier's point. Do you believe that other operators will from outside the region come in?
Yeah. So of course we are quite knowledgeable of the markets and of the operators. We see the dynamics. So definitely we can offer some insight into how the markets are evolving. And one thing that we see is that almost all operators, they try not to be locked into a particular region. So all the operators are trying to find new markets. Of course, in some markets, they're more successful or less successful. But we see there is this basically a cross change of operators. So CIS operators trying to find markets outside the CIS, and non-CIS operators trying to get into the CIS. They bring competition, they bring unique experience. So for example, the CIS was originally based around the largest betting companies. The sport betting was licensed for a long time, and those companies have grown very big as well. And they have the knowledge, they have the resources to go into new markets. But we also see some new startups coming from the more like a gaming environment, and they bring some unique experiences like gamification, like tournaments and so on. And the sportsbook guys are trying to catch up. So it's very dynamic and it's very competitive. I feel that at this time, none of the operators is trying to lock themselves into a particular region.
Thank you, Vladislav. Marinos, have you got anything to add to that? I mean, when I hear what Vladislav says there about, sports betting providers having experience and other, suppliers with different products coming in, to me, that just screams mergers and acquisitions or, growth through, the acquisition of other companies. I mean, how are you viewing it at the moment, Marinos, in terms of local established operators, the international operators coming in?
Look, it's always important to see what the local market looks like and what the local operators are doing. There are some big betting companies in the CIS countries, of course, and you need to get strategic allies always to get in there. The other important point regarding the CIS is that at this point, a lot of big software providers, platform providers are from the CIS. And this is also a good issue because it's easy to understand the market since most of the platforms are made there. And this is another point we need to discuss a bit further, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to discuss that, and maybe we can ask Marcin and Paris with their platforms about that, because what I would venture is if you look at the platform providers in the region, and I'm not going to start doing sales pitches or mentioning them, I think everyone can put two and two together. But those platforms were built for local operators. I think we can fair say that. So, Marcin, I mean, what's your view on that? On the local platforms, the local operators, and the international market?
I mean, I would agree to some extent that there's no big differences in terms of those specific regions versus the Western Europe. Of course, the rest of Europe, if you might say that, is more saturated and more experienced, and especially the UK customers is it's a very demanding group of players. Could be the others are same, but we don't know them yet. I see the differences obviously in the product, but I don't see the differences in the product as per UX and UI experience any longer. I mean, we all used to use Facebook, Google, iPhone, Samsung, and we drive same cars. So we navigate throughout same system, sort of. But definitely there's the local approach in marketing. So you need to know the local partner, as Paris said, because otherwise you can pay for everything, but you just simply burn your money. The other part is also the game offering for both sportsbook and casino. Why? And casino is relatively easy because even if you don't have the full portfolio, you have enough contacts to and people to approach and to to make the better fit. Why sportsbook is more complicated, in my opinion. But this is just the kind of a theory before we enter the market. So obviously, this local approach and localization has been a known issue for years. When I joined this industry back in 2007, one of the most popular games of NetEnt was the Tales of Krakow, which was made for the Polish, sort of. That was one of the most active groups back then. And right now, this went into the direction of copying the different motifs of books or whatsoever. But I think it's always good to have this kind of a better understanding of the market. And if you present it as a brand, as a global brand, you will not be seen as a brand that doesn't understand the market, but has kind of learned a lesson and has approached right people to introduce you to the market. And this is how, the customers will always come to you and try out your product, especially when you get the license. But whether they're going to retain, you're going to retain them or they stay loyal, it's up to your marketing team and the CRM team. And then you need to be very, very specific and very, very targeted, in my opinion.
Okay, I think that tees you up quite nicely there, Paris. Talking about the marketing, the local partners, and bringing it into the big international brands such as Pinnacle. I mean, if you look at the CIS, and I like the LATAM quote, but I mean maybe I say it is a patchwork of many different countries. Obviously, as correctly stated already, Russian was the main language. We're seeing different languages evolve, and certainly in Armenia, every time I go, I see the growth of English, and it's not down to me ordering a coffee. But I mean, from Pinnacle's point of view, you've got Turkmenistan, you've got Uzbekistan, you've got Russia, you've got and a patchwork of countries. How are you going to challenge? How do you take this challenge?
I think one of the things we're looking at is the evolution of the regulations as they keep coming out. Like with the Ukraine, I think they now have something a little bit more substantial. But it's all about if it makes sense to go into the market. And with our product and with our pricing, it might be easier for somebody that's holding 10% or 8%, whatever. But we have a unique product offering, so the taxation has to make sense for us as well. One of the interesting points of the CIS is, with there's from a global perspective. There was a number of operators that were historically located or had some operations in Manila, and that is coming to a head where it's becoming extremely difficult to work there and have any operations. So people are looking for another, not headquarters, but just another location and a different time zone. And the CIS could be an opportunity as far as people having office expansions. But then again, so that's one of the additional benefits of having the regulations where people can come. And certain jurisdictions you can't have trading, you can't have customer service. Pretty much everywhere you can have IT, which is very popular in CIS right now, of course, with all the different providers. But I think that there's a little bit more widespread opportunity for the CIS as a jurisdiction.
Yeah, I think, look, we've done well. We're 20 minutes into the panel and we've touched on legislation, but I think, as you correctly say, it's an example, the CIS, maybe where we can work better with regulators, learn the lessons from Western Europe, where we are getting, for want of a better phrase, hammered now with the ban on advertising in Spain that was mentioned, etc. Who knows what's going to happen with the UK? But for Paris, from how do legislation is happening in the Ukraine? Although before the legislation, you wouldn't have known it was technically not legal. A bit like when Bwin sponsored Real Madrid in Spain, it wasn't technically legal, but people did it. How, as an operator, do you think what lessons can we learn from the past? And you have this great quote, to regulate and not dictate. I know you shared that with us previously. What lessons can operators learn when engaging with these regulatory bodies? Because, I know Armenia has been regulated for a long time, but I think as we'll see the market grow, regulation will also grow. So I'm interested in hearing your view first, Paris, on legislation.
Well, and it's interesting because currently Curacao is looking to they have a master license structure now. They're looking to regulate. So, we're speaking with them, and it's a very similar message. Understand, like, what are your goals? Are your goals to, obviously, with the world as it is, which is why people are looking at this a bit more seriously, I think, in some areas, people need revenue. And, I don't think gaming companies are afraid of paying taxes, but we just can't give our profits, So as long as there's that happy medium and understanding how you can protect the player, that's just at the forefront of everything. Responsible gaming, compliance, all of that, So I think everybody in the gaming industry has done a phenomenal job with that. And nobody's running from it or hiding from it. So, if it's to protect the player, increase the revenue, then for me the scary part is when they try to regulate something they don't understand. So coming out, if they were to actually work with the operators, of course sometimes there's double agendas and that gets a little bit complicated, but if they did understand if they took the time to understand the industry more, I think Malta's done a pretty decent job. In the US market, New Jersey's done a great job trying to understand the market better. But then there's always, once you hit regulations, there's so many pieces of the pie that you have to give up. So there's the tax, there's the licensing, then you've got the software supplier fees and data fees. Don't even get me started on data fees. And at the end of the day, you're investing so much money as an organization into your infrastructure, into everything, your support, your marketing. And then what you take out comparative to what we took out 5-10 years ago is completely different. So, the scalability, it's a much, much more complicated market, I would say, globally.
Thank you, Paris. I think, Marcin, coming to you, you spoke about regulation and legislation earlier when you were talking about the Ukraine and the crossover between I think it was 3 million, I was listening, Ukrainians living in Poland, and obviously the legislative changes that have happened in the Ukraine. I understand there's been some movement in Russia as well, and that there's markets like Turkmenistan which are regulated that we don't hear much about. What's your view mainly on legislation? And to me, a utopia would be to have a regional or a global license. I don't think we're ever going to get there. So, what's your view on legislation? Has Ukraine got it right? And what lessons do you think other countries could learn, maybe?
Speaking of Ukraine, there's no much progress apart from like a second reading in the parliament. So basically, we don't know much yet. So we only hope there's a serious body coming into the game and there's good advisors. Sometimes it looks like the license is made for one specific operator, unfortunately, which is fair play. The problem is that these different countries, no matter if it's CIS or any other country, sometimes there's like this regulatory body is like people that come from land-based business with all privileges and all pros and cons. So for example, when they say like, okay, taxation, we tax like the normal casino of Olympic Group, which is 45-50%, they don't care actually, because they say like, okay, we have this regulation, there can be only one casino of like for 300,000-400,000 people in the area of 50 kilometers or whatsoever. So they don't see this necessarily as a challenge for the online operators. So the only problem is to kind of get into to cash in the fee for the license, and then they don't see the business and the challenges behind if they tax you too high. So basically, with regards to what happened so far, what has been done in Ukraine, it looks promising enough to start talking about that, but we don't know. We hope it's going to be fair play from the government. Obviously, I also hope that the taxation is not going to kill the business, because at the end of the day, to enter a new market is not only to pay the taxes, it's only to increase the operational cost and all the possible fees and headcount and whatsoever. For me, when I touched on this specific market, is the kind of a geographical point of view, but from the business perspective, it's a great nation in Europe that is hungry, sort of like, they have some ambitions. They belong halfway through sort of to Europe, but at the same time, they still in the Russian mentality, many of them, as we know from the political point of view. But there's other markets that are interesting in this region that don't belong to CIS necessarily, but they are like in the transition period, which is like, I don't know, Latvia, Estonia, whatsoever. I think the key is to see like the global product as a main platform and try to make the business plan according to who you meet. I don't normally like to agree with people that speak before me, but I think to find the right person is the key. And then if the legislation fits the expectations, then we just go for it.
Thank you, Marcin. Marinos, what's your view on the legislative and geographical patchwork of the CIS at the moment, and where do you see the opportunities?
I would agree a lot with what Paris said. I think she covered me totally regarding the legislative issues. I think the most important for any local legislation is to understand all the aspects, and you have to also understand the aspect of the operator and create a business model, create a legislation model that it's also a business model, because you need to have business as well if you want to legislate gambling in a way, but to keep the business and get, let's say, earnings from this as a state, you need to do it in the correct way so you have all of the stakeholders happy, and the operators, and the players, and the state. And this is the tricky part. Let's say the equilibrium between all the small elements, the taxation, the responsible gaming, the offerings, the marketing guidelines that need to be in place. We have seen a lot of, let's say, legislative countries taking more measures in the game in regards to the gameplay. Let's say minimum stakes, maximum wins, and things like this. And sometimes you try to over legislate and you get the opposite results. You let's say weaken the actual legislative operators, and you leave let's say a black market opportunity there, which is not a good thing. So I think it is important for each state to see the correct way of doing this in general.
Thank you.
Now, regarding opportunities, thanks.
No, it's Vladislav. I mean, as you mentioned, you had like a lot of experience and been in the market a long time. From a supplier's point of view, what's your view on legislation? There's countries that allow sports betting, not casino. Can we get some viewpoint on you, from you, on how you view legislation and where the opportunities may be?
Yeah, well, it's a very interesting question. So each country is trying to do their thing. I think now it's getting even more complicated with the first of all the economic situation that all the countries are trying to increase their budgets, and all the countries, they have some issues with that. We all know that. There are some political, I would say, decisions which are not economic. So, for example, I actually come from Latvia, and our company was originally established in Latvia. And now during the COVID, we actually had the resolution passed that online gaming is not out. What was the particular reason for that? We don't know, but basically the guys who came into the Latvian market, and we had quite big players worldwide, like William Hill, coming into the market. They were a bit surprised maybe in how it turned out, but this is the environment that we have to work in. In terms of the legislation changes and actually technical perspective, we have implemented maybe around 9 to 10 local regulation changes into our platform. And we feel like from the technical perspective, it's not that difficult. Once you integrate maybe 10 different regulations, the 11th is becoming actually quite simple to do, because there are not many things that the regulator can do, and actually it makes it easier to enter the market. But I would say most of the operators now, they don't feel that they completely understand where it's going to, what are the trends, and what can happen in the next day or so. There are so many changes now. The political parties change. There is this populism. There is a possibility that one party is trying to push for the budgets to be increased by this taxation of gambling. Another party comes in and says, no, we don't need gambling at all. So we see it everywhere, and it's not only in the CIS. So CIS, I would agree that with what was said before, that CIS maybe is a bit backwards in terms of legislation, that there is not enough experience in legislation. But you can see at the biggest West European countries and what legislation they're trying to introduce, and what type of headaches all the operators have with this type of legislation. So I think it's a work in progress for all the countries, not only the CIS.
No, I agree with Vladislav, and I think we've touched on legislation as a panel. If I may, we maybe just move to some product points, which Marinos mentioned earlier, which I'm sure you guys all have an opinion on. But just speaking to the audience, we will open up to questions in a couple of minutes towards the end of the panel. So if you do have any questions, feel free to start writing them, and I'll moderate those questions from the inbox I have in front of me. But maybe starting with Marinos, as you raised the point on the product. Product has to appeal to the market. We talk about it a lot. That in the CIS, there's certain sports which are popular, which may not be popular in other regions. But that's a very base level. I think you mentioned payments as being key. I mean, if you can have all the products in the world, but if you can't take the money, that's a challenge. I mean, Marinos, in terms of products, what do you think is working? Maybe in the CIS as a whole, or maybe some specific examples. And what advice would you give to operators or even suppliers that you work with around entering the market, or what they should be aware of when doing so?
As you said, and this is important, for me the most unique thing at this point regarding the product is the payments, because you have different countries and different payment methods. You have to have a good, vast portfolio of payment methods to accommodate each country, and country specific, but in regional specific. Easy way for the player to deposit and withdraw fast, which is important. Now, in terms of casino games, live casino or sportsbook, I think at this point the market, almost every operator has everything on its portfolio. So the issue is not actually the actual products you have, but how you manage the products, how you see which games are popular, and you create offerings and specific campaigns on them. The same applies on sports. I mean, all operators, we have a sportsbook that has every single sport event on it. It's not someone is missing something. The important thing is to see what each country and players like, need, want, and try to create special things based on that. So you definitely have to localize on each and every part of the product, but in this way, in a way of what the actual player likes, because casino providers are all there. You have everyone. It's not like you don't have a game and you have to get it. And live casino, in live casino, you have definitely to have the language, of course, but that's available too in our days. So for me, this is the important thing at the region.
I think, Marinos, you make a very good point, and I may even coin the phrase localized differentiation. I'm not sure if that's just a posh way of saying localized, but maybe it is. Paris, I mean, you said earlier product king. How are you going to, I'm going to run with this phrase, I like it. How are you going to have this localized differentiation of your product across the different countries to make your product king?
It's interesting with the localized concept because, again, globally, it's easier for me to speak globally. When you go into certain markets, they're correct. Everybody has everything, but then there's some certain leagues that people request because it's localized in the market. And then you have to find the fine balance of integrity because these are small leagues. The integrity of your product and the integrity of the league that you're trading. We typically would go in, and of course, I think the team at Pinnacle's kind of renowned for integrity and having algorithms that can spot things and whatnot. So, we have a lot of confidence no matter what market we're in. But, it's our own brand integrity as well to put up a little, a league that's played on a dirt field somewhere, So I think, that's, trying to get that product offering, there's a fine balance to offer too much and have some compromises, then offer the stronger products. But of course, there is definitely, at this stage of the game, there's enough data out there so you can provide whatever, globally. But whenever we typically hire a country manager and then they let us know if there's something that we're missing in that market or something that we could jump on and get an advantage in.
Okay, thank you. Marcian, in your view, and I'll stop being poncy and talking about phrases I've coined, in terms of localized product, what are the key lessons that you're learning? And I know there's a lot of countries, but to make a general view or some key findings from your point of view?
I've been in this industry for long enough to understand how things work, but I was actually quite surprised because we entering Latvian market. I know it's not a CIS market, but kind of an example how things might go wrong when you don't prepare properly. So basically, I was surprised that one of the leading live casino game providers is not going to be allowed to place on our site because their game studio is in the country. So of course, there's some ways of adding specific games as we speak, sort of. But again, legislation versus reality. So that means that even if you want to target the product on a specific market, sometimes you might end up not having it because the legislation didn't follow the market. That is the lesson, definitely. The other lesson comes from the Polish market, where the regulator specifically says that everything that is not sportsbook is game of chance, and they keep interpreting things. So you end up arguing with the regulator and waiting 6 months up to 12 months to introduce the new product or introduce the promotion. So that's why, speaking of CIS, it's going to be interesting which way the regulation is going to be. If this is going to be same rules as in the other countries, obviously there's always some way to make profit. But it's going to be insanely complicated for the global brands to delegate the budget to enter something that is not really stable enough and promises a good profit. So we'd rather stay in Western Europe, which is our comfort zone for now, complicated or not. Then what is going to be interesting is exactly how we're going to approach the market from the marketing point of view. Obviously, whether there's going to be some alternative methods for marketing allowed, such as PPC, such as even advertisement on television or whatsoever, where we see in other countries is going to be rather complicated. So basically, the lesson I learned, to summarize your question, is that even if things look okay from the distance, like a low-hanging fruit, there will be some challenges on the way when you get there, always, no matter which country. So fingers crossed for CIS that this is going to be the next promised land for the industry, because we all need this. But let's wait what happens.
Thank you, Marcin. Vladislav, coming to you, as obviously as a supplier, you probably know product. I don't want to say better than anyone on the panel, because obviously operators know product. But in terms of your view around product and experience in the market, what do you think the sweet spot for operators or suppliers in the market will be that is maybe different from other regions?
I guess there are two parts to the answer. So basically, the first one is that that our market is unique. I would say there is a big openness to trying new things. So basically, we see a new slots operator coming up with some new game, and many players, they want to try it out. So basically, this is something that we see for a long time, and this leads to kind of a race where all the operators trying to introduce new providers. So it seems that there is no cannibalization in a way. That's basically the more providers you have, the better financials you will have as well. So everybody's trying to catch up. Everybody's trying to find this new popular thing. We see some providers coming up with a new game, and this new games, for example, is making 90% of turnover, for example, because it's a very successful game. So it seems that this area is very ripe for new innovation, and people are happy to try things. The second part, again, we need to come back to the regulation and the way that the countries are regulating, because some of the country take the more, I would say, conservative approach. So they basically certify each game, and we see, for example, in Belarus, the amount of games that you can actually put on the website is very limited, because each game needs to be certified, and it takes a lot of time. And you actually, as a provider, need to make sure that you certify only the games that will actually work for the next year or two. Because otherwise it makes it very expensive. So both of these things are happening. I don't think we will see the stop in the amount of new providers, especially in the slot area, coming up with new games. That's the market is very competitive, it's very hot, and the barriers to entry are not as high, I would say, as in other type of gambling. So it's an interesting time for us as a platform provider, because we need to integrate all those guys.
Thank you, Vladislav. I've just been told that there's 2 minutes remaining. So if there's any questions to be typed in the box, please do so now. Otherwise, I'll look to summarize the panel while these questions come in. I think, from what we understand, there's a lot of opportunity in the CIS. It is maybe the new LATAM, as one of the panelists said, but it is a patchwork of many different countries. So localized product and localized legislation is going to be key into being a success in the market. Does the panelists have any final thoughts that they want to share with the audience? Any key perspective they want to share? If not, we don't have any questions, so we can wrap. Paris, anything to add from the conversation to date?
Well, I was just thinking, since it's early, that's when I do my best thinking. Maybe we need we have so many providers, maybe we need a regulatory provider that goes to all the different regulators and says, here's the package that makes sense for everybody. I'll work on that.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, Vladislav, have a chat with Vladislav on this as well. I mean, maybe if I just ask Marinos, have you got any further comments you would like to make in terms of this, your perspective on the CIS?
I think I would agree with Paris. What she said covers me totally.
This is why I love having Paris on the panel. Everyone just agrees, and she comes up with this great ideas. Marcel, anything you'd like to add? We're all going to agree with Paris.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. It could be actually good to have somebody, but this you call lobby then, right? So it needs to be kind of a body maybe that comes from the platform providers, and then it's being supported by the operators, because most of the legislative moves also hits the platform providers with the certification, with the compliance issues on a platform level. So why not? And business will always push towards lower taxation and great marketing opportunities. So from that point of view, we can advise them well. But on the same level, they need a serious partner that tells them, like, guys, if you go too hardcore and you take the UK approach, you might end up in not having your targets met at the end of the year. So why not to have a body? Yeah.
Sorry, Paris?
It's just such a great example of over-regulation, what's happening with the UK. I mean, it's just... Yeah,
I'm sitting in the UK at the moment.
Yeah, it's a bit undesirable.
Yeah, and the thing is, what I will say on the UK, and I shouldn't venture a comment as the moderator, is it's all politically driven by, as you said earlier, Paris, people that don't understand the market. Now, what will happen in the UK, if anyone cares to what I have to say, is that we'll just have a black market with the old .coms, and people will come in and make loads of money, and you'll have maybe 2 or 3 operators that work. But that is not the CIS, so I digress. Vladislav, any final comments that you would like to add to the panel?
Yeah, it's a very interesting comment that Paris said about the regulation, and that there should be somebody who you can, as an operator, come to and get advice. We see that this is something that our operators already kind of trying to get us involved in that area. Again, mostly it's because the regulation is more or less similar. Of course, there are some nuances, but from technical perspective, for example, if they want some kind of database of bets, you do it once, you do some modifications, and then you can use it for other countries. And this is what we see, and this is what we try to help our operators in doing, because we are amassing, in a way, some knowledge in those areas. So, we are happy to help the operators.
Thank you, Vladislav. Just one question, Paris, and this is aimed at you. I think you should start charging for your participation in these panels. In your view, which country has the best regulation? And I think that's a global question. I think that's just an interesting question for you.
Well, it's interesting because I've been able to get a peek into what Curacao is doing, so I'm actually super excited about. I mean, Curacao is the unregulated regulator. Their approach has been. I've been astounded by what a great approach they've taken. But I think Malta has, up until this stage, they've really done a great job of listening to. They have other issues at times, but they've, the people that they've had. Working with it as the regulators, I think they've done a good job. Of course, it keeps escalating, and they have to change this, have to change that. But a lot of it's for the better. And when they come in and say, "Well, we need to do this for regulations," changing different things to your systems, it usually follows with other jurisdictions anyway. So I don't have a lot of licenses at the moment. So, but I would say that at least they're listening to people.
Okay. Thank you, Paris. At that point, we don't have any further questions. Thank you for getting up so early, Paris. Thank you for being the star that you are, always with the insight. Marinos, Marcin, and Vladislav, thank you for bringing that real regional perspective and sharing your knowledge. Thank you, everyone, for the panel. And I will hopefully speak to you soon in person. But I say that at every virtual event. But if I say at every virtual event, it must come true. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're not live anymore, guys.
Thank you guys. I always learned more from you. And I can